Hello, my name is Christian Swenson. I do videos here on YouTube about autism, autistic consciousness, and life on the autism spectrum. Now, as you can tell, probably I'm male. Sorry if you couldn't notice. But I have noticed that there are a lot of really popular videos on YouTube about autism in women, autism in girls, autism in females, the female experience of autism. And, you know, I do have some to say about that, though there's always the risk of mansplaining, even in the autism spectrum community. Because, and here's the reason why. I've been a professor for a few years. I've taught, I will have taught about 25 classes by the end of this year on my own in the last 3 years or 4 years. And in those classes and also in other contexts, there have been students of mine and friends of mine who are women who come up to me and we have conversations, and they diagnose themselves based on our conversations. This has happened over and over and over, actually. Based on our conversations, many of my female friends and students will say, I think I'm autistic too. And one of the things one of the reasons that's the case is simply that the socialization of women and girls works crosswise to the expression of autism. The more you're socialized as a woman, as a girl, the easier it is to try masking, to fit in. The more you want to do that. The more your special interests become funneled in to the social sphere itself. And instead of maybe obsessing about trains or video games, you look at the girl over there and see she's doing that. I'm going to try to talk like her, but not unconsciously like most people do, but consciously and deliberately, like an acting thing. And as a result of that, I would wager we see a number of autistic women interested in theater. But at the risk of further mansplaining, I am going to, for the bulk of this video, read to you from what I consider the best exposition of autism in women. It's this book, Autism in Heels, by Jennifer Cook O'Toole. And it is a masterful book, masterfully written, superbly insightful. And what I'm going to read to you here is what she calls her checklist. That's kind of her intelligence showing there in that pun. A portrait of women, girls, and our unique autism style. My wager is that many of the people here who were raised women will resonate with this. So here we go. Women and girls are more apt to find less detectable ways to limit or avoid eye contact. We may look at the space between a speaker's eyes in order to reassure them of our attention, while simultaneously reducing our sensory input by avoiding a direct gaze, and thus be able to listen to what's being said. If I really focus on looking at someone in a personal conversation, I lose my train of thought almost immediately. So I brought my theatrical training into everyday life. When listening, I will make brief eye contact, accompany it with a nod or smile, then look off into the middle distance as if considering what I am hearing. If I'm speaking, I may angle my head so that I can cast my gaze slowly but sharply down and to the left. And then again ahead, then slowly upward to the right. Very practiced theatrical techniques that are both attractive and communicate I am thinking about what you're saying, or extemporaneously about what I'm saying. In either case, because it's done with a certain amount of art, until or unless it's pointed out, most people don't notice anything unusual about my eye contact. Unlike our male counterparts, and this is the second bullet point, it's the level of intensity and almost professorial knowledge about our special interest, rather than the special interests themselves, that sets us apart from our neurotypical peers. So in other words, it's the intensity of the interest, rather than the interest, which may be more normal, that sets apart the girl with autism, according to Ms. O'Toole. The third bullet point, frequent passions, aka special interests, include genealogy and timelines, Disney, mythologies, folklore, cosplay, history and historical fiction, time travel, literature and literary figures, language, animals, anime, fashion, music, and theater. And here's the fourth one, special interests provide two primary functions. They give our brains a pleasurable topic on which to ruminate and perseverate, and they act as a social buffer, transportation to a distant time, place, species, or social scenario where interpersonal rules, hierarchies, and customs can be studied and mastered. People on the spectrum are much more likely to experience synesthesia. Girls are 3 times more likely to be synesthetes. Gender identity varies with great obviousness among spectrum females. More commonly expected is some level of androgyny in clothing preference and fluid sexual self-concept. But just as many of us greatly enjoy a rich, distinctly womanly sensuality and or strongly identify with a more classic Hollywood female aesthetic. And most of us fall in the thousands of spaces in between. As always, there are as many ways to embrace and embody female as there are people living the experience. Lining up our collections of books, figurines, dolls, collectibles is one of the ways we play. At all ages, the enjoyment comes more from setting precise tableaux, miniatures, fairy gardens, replicas, even Barbie weddings, rather than engaging in spontaneous interactive activities. Scripting from favorite TV shows, books, plays, and movies is one of the ways we mask social anxiety best. We copy the dialogue perfectly, though often miss the innuendos beneath. Girls often hyper-focus on one all-encompassing best friendship and later romantic relationship, which evolves into an all-or-nothing self-concept. Girls desperately want friendship and easily direct an inordinate amount of energy and emotion towards someone perceived as theirs. We can have a very difficult time navigating the complexities and nuances of female friendships, which in comparison to male friendships rely more acutely on storytelling, though our non-linear thinking, linear and easily distractibility tend to stall conversations instead of furthering them, and emotional and conversational reciprocity, though we can't shift perspectives, unwittingly tend to dominate airtime and neglect to ask open-ended questions. Oversharing or sharing with the wrong people in the wrong circumstances is a common downfall. We tend not to act out as often as we act in. We focus the majority of our anger and frustration at ourselves. If we get in trouble, it's much more likely for sounding like a know-it-all or for trouble regulating our moods. We are frequent victims of abuse, though we may not understand it as such and tend to feel overwhelming compassion or sympathy for those that hurt us. Girls on the spectrum are often word or linguistically based thinkers with a keen interest in word or phrase origins, foreign language, and regional accents, which we have an uncanny ability to imitate. We frequently have a strong connection to poetry and song lyrics and can detect incredibly subtle patterns within both. It is not uncommon to see us collecting and rescuing animals. Spectrum girls are more likely to gather and memorize as much information as we can on social rules, social psychology, and sexual expectations. It's our way of compensating for what others pick up naturally. We tend to be socially naive, blind to others' motives, and have a tough time clearly distinguishing between levels of a social hierarchy. It's not always making friends that's difficult. Often it's our tendency to be unaware of strain in the relationship and or the sustained effort, attention required to maintain relationships that are our downfall. I'm noticing some typos here that I didn't when I was reading it silently. That's interesting. Our friendships can be broken down into eras where close ties end abruptly, though the cause of the breakups may elude us as we break hearts and provoke tempers without even realizing it. We find it difficult to understand manipulation, disloyalty, vindictive or cruel behavior, and social retaliation because we cannot see strategy or perspective. Throughout our lives, we often gravitate towards people who are younger and or older than us, rather than direct peers. The relationships we prefer have clear roles and rules and less need to spontaneously negotiate dialogue, compromise, and group dynamics. In a situation where we are older, we understand that we are in the teacher/leader/big sister role, so it's all right to be more didactic. That we're actually expected to take the wheel, so to speak. On the other hand, if we're younger, we can settle into an apprentice role, watching, learning, and following along. Girls on the spectrum may feel more intensely connected to fictional or historical characters than to real people. Biographies, books, documentaries, films are a favorite way to study people, and from their strategies, choices, and relationships develop a larger personal, emotional vocabulary and learn how to be. Hyperlexia, very early, very fast, self-taught, highly skilled reading, is common among spectrum girls. Girls on the spectrum are often particularly sensitive to artistic, pattern-based mathematical realities, extending their concrete knowledge adeptly into musical cadence and visual art. Many girls find it very tough to clearly distinguish between levels of social hierarchy. We tend to be socially naive, blind to others' motives, and have trouble distinguishing acquaintances from close friends, or define what constitutes an actual friendship. We haven't had enough experience. For many girls, showmanship skills far exceed comfort with spontaneous or one-on-one social interaction. Intuitive use of this sidestep around social anxiety can lead to excellence in teaching, narrative presentation, litigation, and performance. I really resonate with this, by the way. For many, it says perfectionism is the all-hallowed deity and nemesis of the majority of spectrum girls. Challenges with impulsivity, problem-solving, emotional balance, and compulsions make us vulnerable to substance use or abuse, alcohol/prescription and non-prescription drugs, as well as process addictions, eating disorders, self-harm, skin picking, acting out sexually, shopping, gambling, etc., despite our awareness of the negative impact on our lives. Eating disorders like binge eating, anorexia nervosa, and bulimia are indicators of perfectionist tendencies, a need for artificial control, extreme rigidity, and adherence to routine. They are exponentially more present among girls and women and should be considered serious red flags. Females are more likely than males to try to manage anxiety, depression, trauma, and low self-esteem through self-harming behaviors such as cutting or skin picking. Everything we do, and this is the last one, we do intensely and often spend a great deal of time analyzing our own thinking processes, metacognition, as well as larger complex ideas. So that's her opinion, right? And I would wager, because she's so insightful, that she's on to something. But again, I'm not a woman. I do have autism. But I also know that autistic writers and speakers, including myself, tend to project their experience of autism onto other people. And so I would not be surprised if there's some of that there. Temple Grandin does it. Donna Williams does it. It's just normal for us to make mistakes in that way based on our own experiences. So I hope that was useful. I find it hard to imagine the struggles of being an autistic woman, partially because of my gender, but partially also because of the privilege that comes with my gender. So I know you have my sympathy. And know that this book exists. I would encourage you to get it. I really and strongly encourage you to buy this book or get this book somehow. All right, so I'm going to do one more video this week. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you then. Bye.